Hello. As I mentioned earlier, I found an old RV ramp on the side of the road. I had originally planned to just put some legs and use it for a temporary plasma table, but I contacted a company and they had some extra metal that they were willing to give me. I got some angled steel and some 4x4 steel tubing. I fired up the prime weld Cut 60 plasma cutter and went to work. This thing cut through that ramp like butter. I was able to take it apart in 30 minutes. This last piece was giving me trouble, but I got it. After getting that done, I plugged in the Evolution S380 CPS and started cutting my frame out. I wanted to get the miters as perfect as possible, and they came pretty close. I can't tell you the power that this thing has. It's just something that you need to experience for yourself. The blade went through roughly 230 cuts during this project. I would say that that's 10 times the amount of cuts that you would get otherwise from an abrasive saw. I didn't clamp a miter cut properly and it moved on me, so there was a little bit on the bottom. So I cut a block of wood to get a better hold on the piece. The wood also allowed me to cut a left miter because this saw only orientates one way. This is a definite selling point for the Evolution S355 MCS. I continued making the rest of the cuts. Now checking my cuts, and it looks good. I even checked it with a machinist square. I got a side piece and an end piece together, and it was good. I then clamped both ends together and marked the slat positions with a punch. I used the Evolution again to cut the slat grooves. I used the stop feature of the Evolution saw, and it worked quite nice. However, the depth stop bolt was too short, and I had to use a piece of metal to compensate. A longer bolt here would do the trick. I had a 1/4 inch piece handy to check each slat groove as I cut them. I finished cutting the rest of the slats. After confirming that they all lined up, I cleaned up all the grooves with a file. I clamped the frame together and placed it on a flat surface to make sure it was square and even. I welded the top part of the miter joints initially and then cleaned up my welds. I had to get it out of my head, so I went ahead and grabbed the slat material, measured up the slat grooves distance, and cut all the slats to size. Then I went ahead and beveled the joints to weld with my angle grinder. After beveling the joints, I welded the tubes together. After that, I cleaned up my welds and went to the Evolution again to cut them to size. I fired up the Prime Weld Cut 60 plasma cutter and cut both tubes in half to give me 4 legs. The plasma cuts needed convincing with my small crowbar. The cuts were kind of rough, so I used the hammer to get the dross off of the edges, and I used the angle grinder flap disc to clean up the cuts. After getting the legs prepped, I wanted to install the casters next. I used some of the 1/4 inch slat material flat bar as a base for the casters. After getting 4 base pieces cut, I went to the Atlas drill press and used a step drill bit to drill a 1/2 inch hole for the caster stems. The Tap Magic fluid worked well. After cutting one side, I flipped it over to complete the 1/2 inch hole. I then checked the diameter with the caster stem. After drilling the base holes, I took it over to the bench grinder and rounded off the corners on one side of each steel plate to match the contour of the steel tubing. I left about 1/8 of an inch undersized to get a good corner weld on the plates. I then cleaned up the edges for good continuity and welding. I gave the base pieces a good tack weld initially and then finished off the welds. I flipped the table frame upside down and welded all the legs to the bottom, making sure they were all 90 degrees and square. These casters I got from Mugloy are rated for 2,200 pounds. They also have the ability to level the table. Another reason why I like these is they have a nice 12mm stem. I installed the casters and they worked perfectly. I will put a link in the description if you're interested in them. After installing the casters, I flipped the table over and put it on the ground. I wanted to see how it would roll, and it was fine. After talking to my good friend Tim at Tim Welds on the YouTube channel, he advised me that 6 inches was a little hefty, so I decided to use my straight edge and cut a 2-inch piece off the top of the reservoir. It did really well, and I just cleaned up the slag and the sharp edges with my grinder. I clamped the rails to the table frame and sized up for the reservoir. I marked where to cut, and I used the evolution to cut those rails to size. After cutting them to size, I clamped them to the table frame and put the reservoir to see what the distance is from the top. I wanted to get about 1/16 of an inch from the top of the table frame. I used a hammer to convince the rails to get to the right position. After getting into the right position, I then welded the side rails to the frame. I wanted a center cross support underneath the reservoir because I knew there was going to be a lot of weight. So I went ahead and cut another piece from the RV ramp and made a coped joint with my angle grinder. And then I placed it in the center between the table rails. After welding the cross support, I checked the fit yet again with the water reservoir, and it was good. Now that all the cutting and welding was done, I wanted to prep for painting. I cleaned up all the weld joints that I missed and also cleaned the frame with acetone off camera before painting. It took 2 cans of black Rust-Oleum to this frame. I also taped and leveled the knobs and bearings, the casters, and painted them black as well. I cleaned up the slats with my angle grinder and gave them a coat of Rust-Oleum matte black paint to protect them from splashing and rust. After everything dried, I installed the water reservoir for the last time and then the slats. For the most part, the project was a success, and for my 2 hours of welding experience, I think that I did okay. How's everybody doing? Well, the plasma table is finished. It came out just fine. It's very square, it's very accurate. It's gonna be very handy in the shop. It's gonna catch all those gases that are emitted from cutting and all the dross and all that metal. So I'm very happy and very pleased. I wanted to give a shout out to all the sponsors of this episode. We have the Evolution S380 CPS cold cut saw. This thing is a beast. It cut through everything that I threw at it, and it was very accurate, I might add. In regards to the plasma cutting, Prime Weld Cut 60, one of the best affordable plasma cutters out there. It did really well. I'm very pleased with it. I highly recommend both of these tools. I want to give a shout out to Nampu for helping me with the air filtration system to save on the consumables, and also for Magloy for supplying the casters. They are really great, and they do leveling, and I'm able to move it around if I need to move the table around. I hope you enjoyed this episode. This was my first welding metalworking project. I think it came out quite well. It's not perfect, but then again, what is? If you like this episode, please give it a thumbs up, tell a friend, and don't forget to subscribe. If you're interested in any of the products that are shown here, there will be links in the description. Thank you so much. Have a great day.